Okay, so it looks like we've got everybody in from the waiting room that was waiting. Don't be surprised if I'm looking at both screens as I notice the little flash of more folks coming into the meeting. Thank you all for joining me on a Monday morning. Boy, Monday. Ready, set, go. So let's get going here. Oh, come on, there we go. So our agenda today will be a mindfulness moment with me, and then I'll introduce both of our presenters before I turn time over to Ashley, and then we'll go from Ashley to Tanya. So for our mindfulness moment this morning, I thought we would just do a quick little practice together. This one is starting with a purpose. And so it suggests when you arrive at work, that you sit on your chair or office floor in a relaxed position and close your eyes to connect your sensations with your seated body. Make sure your spine is straight, but not rigid. Take 3 long, deep, nourishing breaths. Breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. And then let your breath settle into its own rhythm as you simply follow in and out, noticing the rise and fall of your chest and belly as you breathe. And this is entertaining to try and do with the waiting room. All right, so step 3 in this process is to ask yourself, what is your intention today? Use these prompts to help answer the question as you think about people and activities you will face today. Ask yourself, how might I show up today and have the best impact? What quality of mind do I want to strengthen and develop? What do I need to take better care of myself? During difficult moments, how might I be more compassionate to others and myself? And how might I feel more connected and fulfilled? This will help you set your intentions for the day. For example, today I will be kind to myself, patient with others, give generously, stay grounded, persevere, have fun, and eat well, or anything else you feel is important. Throughout the day today, check in with yourself. Pause, take a deep breath, and revisit your intention. Notice as you may become more and more conscious of your intentions for each day, how the quality of your communications, relationships, and moods shift. So this morning we'll hear from Ashley Lauer. Ashley is a behavior specialist with the Safe and Healthy Schools team at the Utah State Board of Education. Prior to her work at USBE, she was a school psychologist in both elementary and secondary schools. Before working in public education, she spent 6 years working as a recreational therapist in residential treatment facilities for at-risk youth. Ashley is a member of both the Utah Association of School Psychologists and the Utah Recreation Therapy Association. Ashley is passionate about supporting and advocating for the needs of students across the state of Utah. We will also be hearing from Tanya Albornoz. Tanya recently joined the Utah State Board of Education as a prevention specialist for at-risk students after 20 years of working in child welfare. Early in her career, she worked as both a caseworker and a child welfare ombudsman. For the 11 years, for the last 11 years, she held the position of foster care program administrator for the Division of Child and Family Services, which included responsibilities such as training caseworkers and stakeholders, writing law and policy, overseeing contracts with partners, and researching and developing best practices to improve Utah's child welfare system. During her time with foster care program administration, Ms. Albornoz passionately worked to improve education outcomes for children in foster care and dedicated much of her energy to educating the foster care community and partners about the effects of trauma and how to counteract trauma by increasing protective factors. She was also one of the designers and implementers of the UFACET assessment within the child welfare system and won a national award for the UFACET Innovative design. Tanya also recently finished her master's degree in social work at the University of Utah and is the mother of 3 beautiful daughters. So thank you both to Ashley and Tanya for presenting today. And I will turn the screen over to Ashley.
Amanda, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I just really love that we started today with a mindful moment. I don't know if you do that on every time you're having these sessions, but I really think it hits to the idea of us as the adults being in the best place we can be to help support our students. We work with difficult students sometimes, and we're talking about motivation today, and it can be really hard with all the experiences that students have had to really support them. And so I love the idea of starting our own day off with those moments to get ourselves in a great space to work with students and to set that intention. So thank you. And I'm excited for everyone to hear from Tanya later today as well. She is amazing and will provide us with some great insight as well. So let's get started for today. First of all, I want to thank you as mentors for all that you're doing for our students. I don't think your role can be, what you're doing can really be overstated. It's amazing the impact that your investment in our students will have. That one-on-one personal interaction is really what I think will help our students make the gains that you want them to. So really appreciate what you're doing. I am hoping that I don't know about all of you, but sometimes there's some technological difficulties. So hopefully sharing my screen as well as having my camera on will work today. Amanda, if I start becoming choppy, just let me know. I can switch to my phone and have you share your screen as well. So
okay, sounds good. And I turned off my camera in lieu of saving bandwidth, but it looks good on my end. So since mine's kind of iffy, I would say you're good to go.
Okay, sounds great. And if I need to turn off my camera too, I can. I would rather be able to have you see me as we're moving through this, but I can do that as well. So again, today we're going to be discussing how can we motivate students? What can you do as mentors? Because I'm guessing that motivation sometimes is really difficult, whether it be with a young student or a teenager. That can be a really difficult thing to navigate. So again, Amanda already introduced me. I'm Ashley Lauer, behavior specialist at the Utah State Board of Education. Really have a long time passion for supporting students, and especially those students who come from really difficult backgrounds. Working in residential treatment, I had a lot of students who experienced things that none of us should ever experience, and have this perception of themselves that is based on their experiences, but not who they are. And so helping them develop a sense of who they really are and their own purpose and identity, which I think is what you as mentors are helping support as well. So just quick housekeeping, if you can keep your microphone muted. There will be times where I might have you enter some information to the chat box. And I will make sure that I can see that chat box here first before we go to that. I'm going to pull right over here so we can make sure to see that. But there might be times where you might want to share a comment as well, but I'll just let you know when you can unmute yourself for that. And then again, feel free to raise your hand. I should be able to see that. If not, Amanda, if you can track that for me, so that if there are comments that you like to share, questions you like to ask, especially at the end, I'm going to leave some time for questions. So hopefully we can answer any questions that you might have. And then again, like I said, utilize the chat box. I will have a little icon at the top of the screen with a light bulb when I have specific questions that I'd like you to answer in the chat box, or comments that I'd like you to make. So starting that off, I just want you to, if you could just introduce yourself in the chat box. I know some of you already have, but just your name and the district or school that you are working with, just so I can kind of see who's here and where you're coming from. Also, perfect. Thank you, Kelly, for putting Tooele School District in there. Thank you. Also, I have what I like to do in presentations is to provide you with specific information, specific resources that you can utilize moving forward. So the presentation from today is not yet on the Padlet, but I will put it there after our presentation today. And then I will have all the resources that I've used to create this presentation, as well as some additional resources for you as well. So I'm going to put that in the chat box right now, so you can go directly there, look at some of those resources as we're talking, or be able to have that afterwards as well. Awesome. So we have some people from Granite School District, Weber School District. I saw Tooele School District. Awesome. Julia's here from USBE as well. Thank you all for joining us again. And I see Murray School District as well. Thank you for all that you're doing for our students. So moving forward, just 2 objectives for today. The first is that you will understand underlying concepts of motivation. So we're going to kind of talk about some of the brain science of motivation. And I know some of that might, it's a little bit hard to listen to that sometimes, but I think it's really important that we understand what's going on, so that we can know why certain things may work and why other things may not work. And then the second one is to be able to translate self-efficacy theory into specific strategies that will bolster student motivation. So taking, again, a theory, something that helps give us some context into actual strategies that can support students. And some of the strategies may be things that you've done before. They're pretty simple things, but having that context can help us know what we're doing and how we can really leverage our support with students. So I always like to start off my presentations. This is really a social emotional learning activity, and it's a welcome activity, something to get us to connect with one another a little bit more. So in the chat box, what I'd like you to do is just answer this question. What is one thing that has motivated or inspired you this past week? So I want us to dig into ourselves. What is one thing that's motivated you personally or inspired you? Can be dealing with work or just something in your personal life as well. So if you could just put your answer to that in the chat box. And while you're doing that, I'll share one of mine. I have several nieces and nephews and little kids that I love. And I have an 11-year-old nephew who has been taking time daily, if not multiple times a day, to have conversations and help his little 7-year-old cousin. So they get on FaceTime often, and he just spends all this time with him trying to help and support him, which has been really amazing for me to see. It looks like we've got watching Survivor. That is always inspirational. Fall cleaning to prepare for winter. We've got inspirational thoughts, comments of appreciation. We've got found a student that reads a 1st grade level and is in 4th grade and needs someone to read with daily. That's great. Music can be inspirational. Spending time with a partner, with your husband. That's fantastic. Seeing a student be successful with behaviors. Painting, having a successful experience. I love that. And the interesting thing is, it doesn't have to be something huge. There's these little moments throughout our day that can be inspiring. Some of the things are bigger, but there's also little moments that we have. And some of the things that you've discussed here in the chat box really fit into these ideas that we'll talk about with the self-efficacy theory. So thank you. If you are continuing to think of things, feel free to share them in the chat box so we can all be inspired by the things that we've experienced this week. So now we're going to delve into some of the science of motivation. So motivation in the brain. So we're looking at this system, right? It's these neurons in specific regions of the brain that are sending chemicals via these networks to other regions, creating pathways for future signals. So really it's these neural circuits, and there are certain parts of the brain that are being utilized that help create this motivation system. I always like to think of it as there's these highways in our brain, and the more that chemicals go down this path, this highway becomes bigger and bigger, right? And there's these other maybe little dirt paths that we can help develop these paths by certain experiences. So we've got this highway that's already built, and sometimes that highway is healthy and where students need to be, but sometimes there's experiences of things that have happened that we can do some things to help create different highways if needed. But I like to have that visual of these highways that are the main pathways, but there are shifts that can be made onto these dirt pathways and to build those roads out if there's some things that are making our systems unhealthy. So as you'll see here, these neural circuits are influenced by both our genes and by life experiences. So you can see genes as kind of the blueprint of motivation, but then these experiences can also impact the motivation system, especially at different stages of development. They impact our expectations, and they also impact, and I'm talking about the experiences, also impact the actions that we're motivated to take. So thus, these experiences may alter these neural pathways, and they can alter them in different ways depending on what this experience is. So there's two types of motivation. There's what's called approach motivation, and that is kind of seeking pleasure. That is, you're motivated because there's something that is there that you may want, and that can be something tangible or it can be something internal. And then there is avoidance motivation, and that is motivation where you're avoiding danger, or you're avoiding a threat in some way. And so it's important to note that approach motivation is really the key to most forms of learning. So seeking something, really having that as your motivational force is really the key. And then that avoidance motivation, it's important for our survival, but it can really inhibit some of the higher level learning that we're trying to get students to do. So if they're always motivated by this threat or avoiding something or a fear, then sometimes they can't access some of that higher level learning, right? Their brain is focused on this immediate response instead of planning to attain a longer range goal or to resist impulsive behavior. So it's important as we go through a little bit more, we're going to see some of the things some of the experiences that might alter, this motivation system. And you'll see how sometimes the students that we're working with that avoidance can take over instead of that approach. So how can we leverage experiences to help students really be motivated in that approach motivation? So some important things to note. One, again, the motivation system can be disrupted by threat or by hardship. Again, what we're talking about, life experiences matter. The experiences that they have outside of their work with you, but also those experiences that they have with you. And then this is really key, I think, as we're talking about, I think this is a key of why Check and Connect is so powerful, because the consistent presence of a supportive adult makes a difference. And that supportive adult, right, it can be you. There's also other supportive adults, but that is such an important role that you can play. So let's talk about some of the things that might disrupt the motivation system. And I want you to think about the students that you work with. And are they experiencing anything on this list? Are they experiencing multiple things on this list? So the first one is excessive stress, right? So a certain amount of stress is actually really important, but when it becomes excessive, When it becomes distress, that can really impact our students. Lack of positive relationships. Sometimes as students are in foster care, that means that there's some relationships in their lives that haven't been fantastic. And maybe they are in a situation where now they have a family that they're living with that's really building those positive relationships, but they still may not be there. Feeling hopeless. Having a fixed mindset, or thinking that there's no growth that can happen, right? I'm stuck in the same way. I'm as smart as I'm going to be. You can fill in the blank. There's kind of with a fixed mindset, there's almost this ceiling that's on where a student feels like they can go. And then having some sort of an addiction, with whether it be with substances or different behaviors that we have, but having some sort of an addiction. So I just wanted to ask you this question, thinking about any students and what they're experiencing in their lives. These motivation systems may become more driven by avoidance and fear. So I just want you to think about and comment in the chat box. How do you feel like these disruptions might play out in the classroom or in the school? So if a student is experiencing some of these things, what might you see within the classroom or in the school? I'll give you just a moment to put some of your thoughts in the chat box. So sleeping, irritability, absence from school, ditching, acting out, isolating, lack of self-esteem, skipping class, failing grades. We've got acting out again, drop in grades. Yeah, there's so many things that some of these background experiences we can see them in the behaviors of our students. Someone else said low motivation, failing grades, not really caring. Definitely, there's so many different things. The amazing and great thing is that we can counteract some of those experiences that are being had. We can counteract some of those disruptions. I like this last one was put in there, on the phone avoidance. I think some of us might experience that as well. We use that phone to avoid things that are happening. Thank you for all of you for sharing those insights with us. So it's important, right? We've got these disruptions, which might disrupt this make our motivation system unhealthy. And it's important that for a motivation system, there's two really important pieces, right? One is intrinsic drivers, or your own purpose, your own curiosity, your own desire to learn. And then the other is extrinsic feedback. And I'm sure most of you have heard this a little bit, but the things from the outside, the external rewards, tangible rewards, feedback from verbal feedback from people. There's these external things that also impact our motivation system. The important thing is that we have both intrinsic drivers and external feedback in order to create that healthy motivation system. So it's really important that if you have students who have more intrinsic drivers, right, some constructive feedback may be beneficial for them. If they're lacking some of that internal motivation, then they might be more motivated by encouragement. So you're kind of building that external feedback. Whereas if there's already a lot of internal motivation, some constructive feedback can also be helpful as well. So just in summary of all of what we've talked about here with motivation and how it's structured within our brain. So we have the motivation system. It's comprised of these neural circuits where genes are the blueprints, but experiences can shift the chemical pathway of the circuits or the chemicals that are released within the system. And there are two types of motivation. You have that approach motivation, which is seeking pleasure, which is really the key for learning. And then you have this avoidance motivation, which is this motivation by fear or threat, which again is really important for survival, but also can inhibit that higher level thinking. And then that the healthy motivation system is built upon both the intrinsic drivers as well as the external feedback. Those together create that healthy motivation system. So now we're going to shift to talk a little bit about the self-efficacy theory. I'm not sure how familiar any of you are with the theory. We're not going to go into depth. I want to use this theory really to give some context behind some strategies that we can use. Kind of will give us this foundational understanding of why some of the strategies for motivation can help boost student motivation. So we'll just read this quick quote. I know this is a lot on one page, but I thought it was really important. And this comes from Albert Bandura, who is kind of the founder of the self-efficacy theory. And he says, people's beliefs about their abilities have a profound effect on those abilities. Ability is not a fixed property. There is a huge variability in how you perform. People who have a sense of self-efficacy bounce back from failure. They approach things in terms of how to handle them rather than worrying about what can go wrong. So I've underlined some of these key phrases. Number one, ability is not a fixed property. We talked about on a previous slide that disruption of having a fixed mindset. And the important thing is that it's not a fixed property. There can be growth, right? And then that people's beliefs about their abilities have a profound effect on those abilities. So our students' perception of what they can do influences their motivation to do it, right? So if we're in this hole where we feel like, wow, there was, the example of a student who is in 4th grade but reading on a 1st grade level, we've got to create some experiences there that can help build their confidence and build their belief in their ability in order for that motivation to grow, which it sounds like there's some reading happening daily to help support that. So just quickly, what is self-efficacy? We've talked about it a little bit, but it's a belief in one's effectiveness in performing specific tasks. So it's your belief that you can find some success, which is what this quote says. The motivation to act also requires some expectation of success. So there has to be a belief that we can do something. And it affects how much effort students put forth and how long they'll persevere when faced with challenging tasks. So I'm guessing we all know, a student who we've worked with who, maybe you're working on a math problem or you're working on reading, and after 1 or 2 mistakes, it's like, I'm never going to be, I can't do this. I'm not going to do this. There might be throwing of papers. There might be all sorts of behaviors, right? And it really comes down to this, I don't really believe I can do it. It's easier for me to throw things around and deflect that feeling of inadequacy than it is for me to be able to say, I don't think I can do this, right? So some of those outward behaviors, kind of show that lack of self-efficacy. And you see that perseverance in those challenging tasks is diminished without that, but it can be increased as we build those little blocks of success. So there's 4 sources of self-efficacy according to Bandura. And I think as you were providing some information on the welcoming activity, it was interesting because some of those fit within those 4 sources of self-efficacy and the things that help to motivate us. So we'll just talk about these generally on this slide, and then we'll connect them with strategies as we move forward. So the first one, we're going to start at the top here, mastery experiences. So this is experience in overcoming obstacles through perseverant effort. So finding success, having successful experiences is something that builds our self-efficacy. The second one will come over to the left here is vicarious experiences. And that is seeing someone similar to myself finding success. So when I can see someone similar to myself finding success, that strengthens my belief in my own ability. A lot of times we see this with especially with as we're, hitting preteens and teenagers, that those peers are so important, but we can also play a part in showing that success to our students. The third one, which is at the bottom here, is social persuasion. Some people also call that verbal persuasion, which is persuading others that they have the ability to master certain given abilities, right? So we talked about previously the fixed mindset. This is having a growth mindset, or helping develop a growth mindset. So really giving information, giving feedback that helps our students to see that they are more capable than maybe they think they are, that they can build their ability or capability. And this is really founded in giving very credible communication and feedback. So there has to be a belief in that feedback that's being given. It has to feel credible to the person who's receiving that feedback. And then the fourth one over here on the right is physiological, also stated as emotional state. And that's a reliance on our own somatic and emotional states in the judgment of our capabilities. So I feel things in my body. I have different emotions that guide my feelings of my ability. So a positive mood can increase your belief in yourself, while anxiety can undermine it. So really helping students to get in a place where they have this positive feeling about what they're doing. And Amanda, when we started this morning, kind of really did something that fits right into this category with the mindfulness, right? Part of this physiological or emotional states is finding ways to reduce stress reactions and to lower anxiety. So for me, she helped me this morning because I'm giving a presentation, and to be able to do some of that deep breathing and mindfulness and set intentions helped reduce some of my anxiety. So creating experiences like that. So now we're going to delve more into actually talking about some of these strategies and how and categorizing them within these sources of self-efficacy, and so having these strategies really categorized within those areas so we can see maybe what source we're building through the strategies that we're using. So again, first one is the mastery experiences. And this is the experience in overcoming obstacles through perseverant effort. And there's a really great kind of example of this that helps me to visualize what that actually means. And the example is kind of thinking about what a video game designer does. And I'm not really a video game player, but a lot of our students are, so it can kind of be helpful to see it in this light. So thinking of a video game, and we'll use an old school Tetris game for this example. So Tetris, right? It's where you're building, you're trying to fit these blocks into other blocks so that you keep the blocks below a certain level so you can move to the next level. And if you think about that game, each level, it gets a little bit more difficult. So it starts off pretty easy. And then second level gets a little bit more difficult. The pieces get a little faster. The pieces that you're given are not as helpful. So it kind of builds upon itself. And as it goes through those levels, it becomes more difficult. And that really is the focus of these master experiences. How can we create these experiences that are on within the level a student needs in order for them to find mastery? In education, we call that the zone of proximal development, right? If we make things too easy, students become bored and then they don't engage. If we make things too hard, it becomes overwhelming and you lack the engagement. So it's really finding that middle ground, that sweet spot of where our students can perform and find success. And mastery experiences are really, it's the most powerful source of self-efficacy. So the more a student can find that mastery, the more that will build their self-efficacy, more than some of these other areas. So I was thinking about specifically your check and connect process and how you're working individually with students and kind of using this database decision-making to create interventions, and really how important it is for those interventions to have some smaller goals to encourage those mastery experiences. So, you're setting this small goal for the student to find success. And then once they find success there, you're building upon that. But you're using that data to do that. I think that's so powerful and something that is already within what you're doing, but maybe shifting those goals that you're setting to make sure that it's within that sweet spot, that zone for students. Another important thing, and then I'll bring up some of these strategies as well, is to teach specific learning strategies. So sometimes we assume that our students know how to organize things or know how to study for a test or have already learned social emotional learning skills. But it's important for us to take a step back and really explicitly teach those skills. And maybe it's connecting with a teacher and they are, just giving some suggestions of things that they might focus on with the student in teaching. But that can increase the likelihood of student mastery experiences because now they actually have the skills to perform the tasks that they're being asked to do. As we're talking about these strategies, again, we've got teaching the organizational skills and then helping students organize their work to build successful experiences. And then we have this model of the I do, we do, you do model, right? So we model how to complete a task and then we do it together and then we have the student do that. So we're building, again, their capacity to complete tasks. And then this teaching capacity building skills almost, kind of goes hand in hand with the teaching specific learning strategies, but really building those goal setting skills, that problem solving, that ability for them to advocate for themselves, and just taking little times in your interactions with students to build some of those skills. And then teaching students how to self-monitor, helping them to understand where they're at and where they can go, right? Noticing, oh man, I just totally went off for a long time. I've got to come back to this, monitoring their behaviors and their skills, which that takes some time to do. But within, incrementally, we can teach some of those skills. And then really important to provide students with choice on how to accomplish an assignment or a task, choice on how to move through some of their educational experiences. And again, I know that this might be connecting with the teacher and really working with them on some of these choice aspects of things and where can I give a student choice, things like that. So that's our first one, the mastery experiences. Again, really the biggest source that can help to bolster our students' self-efficacy. Then we have vicarious experiences. And these, again, are observing people similar to oneself succeed at a task that can strengthen our beliefs in our own abilities. So sometimes we can be that person who's providing that vicarious experience. We can be that person who is showing success. A lot of times as students get older, peers can also play a huge role in providing those examples of success. One thing that's really important about this is that, as you see here in the definition, it's people who are similar to oneself. So the more you can connect with students, the more they see themselves in you, the more you can build on common interests, the more powerful these vicarious experiences will be. If there's not as much of a connection there, there still is power in that, but it becomes more powerful the more connected you are with students, the more they feel similar to you, the more they feel that you have common interests with them. So again, most important thing with vicarious experience is to build those relationships with students, which I'm guessing you are all pretty wonderful at doing that. So really spending that time, and then modeling skills, modeling learning strategies and learning processes for students. So in the master experience, we talked about teaching those learning strategies. This is more about modeling that, showing them how to use that, showing them how they can be successful with some of those skills. And a lot of the process of Check and Connect is also, this is kind of inherently built into that. And then again, we talked about using peer models. So I think this is really important because a lot of times, and I'll explain what these two peer models are, a lot of times we use mastery peer models, which is fantastic, but it's also important for us to use coping peer models. And I'll tell you what the difference is. So a mastery peer model is someone who demonstrates a targeted skill or learning strategy. So it's someone who they can look to and say, wow, that person found success in giving this presentation. Maybe they got up and they gave a presentation and this student's really nervous about doing that, but they saw the courage of this student. The second type of peer model is the coping peer model. And that is someone who is modeling how to learn a skill or strategy. So that person may be making mistakes along the way, but they're overcoming those mistakes. So they're seeing the process of growth instead of just the outcome of mastery or of success. So it's kind of looking at, they once struggled, but then they were able to find success. It's kind of looking at that process. So how can we show someone in the process of learning and growth, seeing those mistakes being made, and that it's okay to make those, but we can still continue to move forward. And then the last one is really connecting concepts with real life examples. And this is something I think you've probably talked about previously, but this is kind of providing the why behind that. Those real life examples, again, it's if there's not a model there in the school or in the class, you can find a model of someone that maybe the student looks up to and talk about their experiences and their growth that's happened, and the ability they've had to find success. So it's expanding the models that you can come from. So using those real life examples, those real life people that the student is already connected with. So then our third is social persuasion, again, commonly called verbal persuasion. And that is giving others, verbal persuasion by others, right? That one has the capabilities to master given abilities or given tasks as well. So this is really where the growth mindset lays, being able to help students see their ability to progress. Their skills and talents are seen as capacities that can be developed through practice. So really focusing on that practice. And then providing those specific positive praise and affirmations. I think sometimes we focus our praise and affirmation. Sometimes it can be general, which we want it to be as specific as we can be. So really delving into why you feel like they did well or did a good job instead of just saying good job. So being specific about that. But also when you're praising or giving a positive statement, talk about it in regards to one's character or values, or acknowledge their strength or their effort, instead of just the outcome that came. So maybe, an example would be, it was brave of you to present in front of the class, instead of that was a great presentation, but really talking about what it took for them to present and expressing your praise in that way. And then providing that quality feedback and steps needed for success. So we talked about previously when we were talking about intrinsic drivers and external feedback, that feedback will change kind of depending on how intrinsically motivated they are. So making sure that matches that if the intrinsic motivation is low, that there's more encouragement being provided. That doesn't mean you can't provide any constructive feedback, but you've got to really build that encouragement in. If there's more intrinsic motivation, you can build more of that constructive feedback. Obviously, that encouragement is still important there, but they'll respond more to the constructive feedback there. And making sure that feedback is again, really specific and doesn't just give them, kind of gives them a plan or a map on how to move forward as well. So it's very specific and builds upon what can happen. And then we've talked about this emphasize student growth, effort and growth, and that's kind of that growth mindset, but focusing on the effort that they are giving within the tasks that they're working through. And then this last one is motivational interviewing. And I put in the Padlet a copy of a presentation that was given to this group in, I think it was June, but it was a specific presentation on motivational interviewing. So I thought that would be helpful for you to have. I got the permission from Clarissa, who gave that presentation, to provide it for you again, so you could review some of those steps to motivational interviewing and look at that as a way to help students specifically in this area of social persuasion. And then the last one is this physiological, or these emotional states. And this is the reliance on one's, again, somatic or emotional states in the judgment of capabilities. It is, how can we, reduce, sorry about that. There we go. How can we reduce, keeps going the wrong way. Let me go back here. Sorry about that. There we go. So how can we reduce some of that stress? How can we reduce some of that anxiety that a student might be feeling surrounding experiences, activities that they're being asked to do that maybe they don't feel as confident in, they don't feel that sense of self-efficacy. So strategies here, teach self-awareness skills, and self-awareness is one of the 5. It is a social emotional learning skill. And I provided on the Padlet some links to some resources from CASEL, the Collaborative for Social Emotional, or for Academic Social Emotional Learning. They're a national organization that really focus on social emotional learning, and really important for us to really focus on teaching these self-awareness skills to help students even be aware of the emotional states that they're experiencing, be aware of how things, how their emotions are affecting what's going on with their body. And these skills are, recognizing, understanding, labeling, expressing, and being able to regulate those emotions that they're feeling. And that regulation piece is really a self-management skill more than a self-awareness skill, but really teaching those skills directly. And then teaching students to use relaxation techniques, just like what we did prior to this with the mindful moment. Students also, it's, if they can set an intention for the day, depending on the age, you facilitate things a little bit differently, use different words. You can, depending on the developmental stage that a student is in, but you can do things. There's great information out there for relaxation techniques and mindful moments to help our students. And there's a lot of research that that shows that doing this daily can really be supportive. Doing it at times, a lot of times coming in to school, there might have been things that happened prior to school that kind of already are affecting our students and their emotions. And so in your meeting with students, I'm not, if you're meeting with them first thing in the morning, making that a part of your checking in, just a quick moment to help that student to get in a better state, a better emotional state before moving into the school day, can help improve that emotion throughout the day. And again, reducing stressful situations. So helping, working with teachers when there are situations that a student has indicated to you will be stressful or might be, or overwhelming, or maybe you're just noticing them in their behavior that is going to be that way. How can you facilitate? How can you adjust what's happening, modify those experiences to help reduce some of that stress while still allowing the student to participate and to engage in that experience? And then fostering that safe and supportive environment. As you're working with students, as you're working with their families, there's that ability to really foster that safety for a student. Obviously, there's a lot of things out of your control, but your relationship with the student, your relationship with their family, or your attempt at building those relationships is really going to be key in fostering that supportive environment. That work with teachers as well, such a key to helping reduce those stressful and that stress and anxiety for students. So those are really the 4 sources of self-efficacy and some of the strategies that fit within those sources. Hopefully this provided the context so that you can understand, maybe why something's working, or how you can adjust something a little bit to help increase that motivation for students. There's a lot of other resources within that Padlet that can provide some other tips and thoughts and ideas, but really wanted to focus on giving the context behind those strategies today. So what I want to do is finish off with an optimistic closure, a question to help you think about, okay, I've got this information. Now, what can I do with that? What can I do tomorrow or later on today to help my students? So in the chat box, what I'd like you to do is provide, what is one strategy you learned today that you can use with students tomorrow to help support them, to help improve their motivation? Again, you can just type that right in the chat box. So starting with the quick mindful moment. Thanks, Michelle. Celebrating the small accomplishments. I love that. Teaching students to have a growth mindset. That's great. I love those. I love those thoughts. And hopefully, as we're talking about, as you're processing through some of this, I know for me, sometimes it takes me a while to process, but you've got some really specific strategies that you can use. We have the zone of proximal development as well, putting those experiences in that sweet spot. Thank you so much. And then last one here, and I think there'll be more coming in, but teaching them to have more positive towards the tasks they have. So being more positive towards those tasks. And then a second on the celebrating small accomplishments and that praise. It's amazing what that praise will do if it's specific and really connects with the student and what they feel like they've done well. Thank you for all that you shared there. What I want to do here is just open up. Looks like we only have about 4 minutes, but if there's 1 or 2 questions that someone has, or you can also, I will provide my email if you'd rather email me a question separately, but feel free to unmute if there's a question that you'd like to ask, or type something in the chat box. If not, we'll give you a quick break before Tanya hops on.
Thank you so much, Ashley. That was perfect.
Of course. And there's my email really quick, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Amanda. Thank you everyone for all that you're doing for our students. It's really appreciated and is super impactful. So thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. We do have a couple minutes, so keep adding to the chat. You're welcome to email Ashley directly, and we'll get ready to go with Miss Tanya here. The screen should be ready for you, Tanya, when you're ready.
Sounds good. I'm working on it.
Okay, fair enough. No worries. It's Monday. I know that Monday was a little harsher than I was ready for myself, so.
There we go.
Awesome.
Do you want me just to launch right in?
Yeah, I'm not seeing any specific questions for Ashley, so I think we can go ahead and keep moving forward. And
okay, perfect. First, I just want to say, Ashley, that was a fantastic presentation. I got to catch about the last 30 minutes of it and wish that I was there for the whole thing. I think that'll be really helpful, especially to the kids that you guys are working with from DCFS. So I want to just start out. I know Amanda already kind of read my bio and introduced me, but I just wanted to let you know that who I am and why I'm presenting this to you today. So I came from this DCFS. I was the foster care program administrator over there for about 13 years. And I think some of you probably know me from that. I've presented to the Check and Connect mentors in the past a couple times. But while I was over there, one of my main roles was to implement the assessment tool that DCFS is utilizing for all families and all children. And so I was a part of the formation and implementation group and committee that put the UFACET tool together. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And so I checked with them to make sure that it was okay that I present this to you, and they said yes, and that I was still considered, you know, pretty much one of the experts on this. So I wanted to let you know that I'm open to any questions or dialogue about this. And I'm also at the very end going to give you the contact information for the person over at DCFS right now who can provide you with any answers to any questions if you need to contact them. So what we're going to talk about today is the assessment tool that DCFS utilizes. I just want to let you know that they use this for all students, for all children, for all adults, for all families that they're working with, both in home. So if the child remains in the home, or those that are in foster care, and those that return to the home after foster care. So this assessment tool captures everyone that they're serving. And it's called the Utah Family and Children Engagement Tool. And you'll see the diamonds. If you ever get to see the assessment or the assessment booklet, sometimes they bring those for team members to see. You'll see that there's this diamond on the front cover, and I'll explain to you what that means in a second. But it's an evidence-based assessment tool, and it's based off of principles of communication. By the end of today, you'll understand hopefully what using the UFACET how it can inform and drive your work with children and families, as well as the work of DCFS, and how it helps provide consistency and clarity of understanding among all team members. So again, hopefully you'll understand what the UFACET is and how the information is gathered by DCFS. You'll consider how the UFACET can help with planning, both on the DCFS side and on your side when you're working with students. We'll discuss your role in updating the UFACET and how you can play a role in gathering the information for that. And also understand how DCFS utilizes the UFACET to achieve outcomes with families and with students. And just to start off, to make really clear, you are allowed to have, to be able to look at and have the assessment that DCFS completes with the student. And we'll talk about what that looks like. Okay. So the UFACET, one of the things about the tool that's really interesting is that it helps capture all of the facets of the family and the twists and the turns that happen in a case, the nuances of the family over time. And we specifically named it the UFACET for a reason. We like to use this analogy when we're talking about the UFACET. If any of you have ever seen a rough cut diamond, this is what it looks like right here in the middle, this brown stone kind of thing. That's what it looks like when it comes out of the ground. And if any of you have ever seen the process of a diamond being cut and polished, you'll know that it takes a specific skill set of a person who's been trained to look at this gemstone and find the strengths in it and bring those to light. So the cuts that they make on a diamond in order to make it shiny and bright are called the facets. If it's cut poorly, it'll be less luminous. If it's cut well, it'll be really brilliant and shiny. So every diamond has its own unique personality and its own strengths. It must be treated individually. And then every stone needs to be looked at and evaluated. And then the cutting procedure is very precise. They have to grind it, smooth it, polish it, and help it find its brilliance. So the people that make these cuts on a gemstone are called facetors because they have that specific skill set and the right tools. And so most of the students and the families that DCFS works with and that you work with can be considered kind of like this rough cut diamonds. And the idea behind the UFACET is that it's helping find those precise areas where we need to focus and target when we're working with these students so that we can help them reach their full potential. So really the UFACET is about transformation, right? So it's about taking these families and these students and helping them to reach their full potential. So just think about that philosophy as we go through today and how this tool might help you achieve that with these students. So we're going to talk about, or that was kind of the why that we use this assessment tool. Now we're going to talk about how the information is gathered. And first of all, it's important for you to know that DCFS, like I said, gathers information on all parents or guardians that are working with the students. They gather the information on each specific child in the case. So it'll be the student that you're working with as well as all the students' siblings. They gather information from relatives and friends. They're supposed to be asking those questions of everybody who's involved in the case. So all team members, including you, they should be asking you questions that you're able to inform on the assessment tool. They also look at the past history. Many of the students and families might have past cases, but they might also have other assessments or other information that they have to look at, past police reports, things like that. And they'll look at other formal and informal assessment reports. So the reason this is important is because it's like putting a puzzle together. And that's why we use this graphic on this slide, because without all of the information from all of these sources, you're only getting pieces and parts of the picture. But if you gather the information from all of these places, then you can put together the entire puzzle and see the whole picture of what's going on with the child and with the family. And it's, as you probably know and understand from working with these students, it's really difficult to be able to see the whole picture without having all of this information. Now, unfortunately, because you guys are just working with one student in a family, you'll only get a part of this. But know that philosophically, DCFS should be gathering all this information, and then they should be able to see the whole entire picture. And again, that's philosophically. So really fast, I'm going to show you what the UFACET looks like, because my guess is that many of you have not seen it before. Let's see. Please let me know if you can see that.
I can see it, Tanya, and I just wanted to let everybody know I did a quick email out to everybody who's online right now. Tanya gave us a PDF of this, so you should have that in your email as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so this is the UFACET tool, and you'll see right here, this is the front page, and you'll see that there's 4 main modules, and we call these the 4 core domains. So you have the family together, parent, guardian, other, and then coming back around, you have the household items, and then you have the child functioning items. So when DCFS is assessing a family, they'll gather information, again, from everybody who's involved in the case to help inform these items. Down here, they're supposed to talk to all parents, so mom, dads, any stepfathers, stepmothers, maybe even any grandparents who are involved in or have been involved in caring for the child. And then here you'll see household. These are items that specifically pertain to the household, and if whether or not they have, let's see, I'm going to tell you what E means. Give me 1 second, Jeff. So these are items that specifically have to do with the needs of the child and the children involved, and if the parents are able to care for those needs. And then the last thing is the child functioning domain. And this is the domain that you will mostly be interested in. And this is the domain that DCFS will be able to provide to you for the students that you're working with. The rest of these domains, you probably will not be able to have the information about them. It's more for DCFS so that they can have the full picture of the family. But in the very least, we're going to talk about these items, what's here, and what each of them mean. So Jeff asked a very astute question. He asked what the E mean, and I'm going to tell you what that means right now. So we're going to go over this scoring. So there's a scoring system and rubric that DCFS uses when they score a student and family. So we're going to talk about what the 0, 1, 2, and 3 means. The E is basically a function for caseworkers if they have forgotten to gather the information, or if they've gone out and asked questions to the family and forgotten just to assess this specific item, they can mark the E. It means explore. So as they're inputting it into the computer, they don't have to stop or leave that one blank, but they can mark it explore, and then they can print out only the explore items to take out and make sure that they remember to gather the information for those items. NA, as you probably have guessed, means not applicable. This item's not applicable. There's quite a few, like if you look at this child functioning domain, for the younger kids that DCFS works with, like the 0 to 3, this education one wouldn't specifically apply to them because those kids are not in school. So that's what the NA is for. And then we're going to talk about what the PF is. That means protective factor. And I'll explain what that is a little bit further along in the presentation. You also have these ones down here that have asterisks next to them. And what that means is that if they score a specific score, then it opens up a further module for that child. There's a few that you'll see in other areas. So the parent, guardian, other have the trauma one as well. But this is important for you to know, because if they score a particular score, then they have further breakout modules. So you can see what those are. So if, for example, there's an issue with the child having behavioral or emotional needs that need to be addressed, and that specifically has to do mostly with mental health needs, then they'll mark this item a particular score, which we'll talk about in a second, and it'll open up this further module that they have to complete out for that child. And then they'll have to assess these further items. The functionality is really great because it means that any child who doesn't have these issues, they don't have to assess those further things for. But when they do, technically they're supposed to open this up. Now this module right here is the education module. It should specifically interest you because you should be seeing this probably on every student that you're working with, unless they are a student that have good grades and good attendance and good achievement and all of that. This one specifically talks about their education. So if they have an issue or a problem on this one up here, then it'll open up this further module that the caseworker then needs to assess with your help, hopefully. So you can see that there's a few other domains. Child risk behaviors are really for risk behaviors that are putting the child themselves or others at risk. Trauma, here's the caregiver trauma one, but the child trauma one is very similar. Basically, the DCFS worker, if they suspect or know that the child has been a victim of any kind of trauma, their job is to just mark yes or no. This is the only kind of module that has that, or they can mark suspected. And then they're supposed to provide that to the treatment provider, so their therapist, so that the therapist can further explore that. And then we also have a cultural considerations and a developmental domain. And this one also might interest you for those who work with maybe students who have lower levels of functioning. This is where they're supposed to also assess the cognitive, developmental, and communication functioning of the child if there's an issue above. So you'll see that there's also a few modules specifically for children in foster care, because I told you they use this assessment tool for all children and families that they work with. They will assess the quality of the visitation between the student or the child and their family. So this visitation module is specifically to assess that. And then you'll see there's also a substitute caregiver module. So this is assessing the foster parent or the kinship parent or whoever is the placement provider for that child. These are only home-based placements. And they're assessing these specific items. And the reason they're assessing these specific items are because these are the ones that was shown through the data really lead to disruption in placement. So the idea is that the caseworker and the team are looking at these items all along the way to prevent the child from having to move from that home or to prevent the child from disrupting from that placement. And then further breakout models, there's one for substance use. So if the child has substance use issues, and only if the child is in foster care, then the caseworker also has to assess these items as well. And this one won't really apply to you, but or the students you work with, but just know that if a child's placed in residential treatment, they also have another module that they explore. So we're going to focus today mostly on the core domains and, on the core domain of child functioning. So I'm going to stop sharing this and go back to sharing the PowerPoint. If it will let me advance. Okay. And again, the reason behind this tool is so that the entire team can have a clear understanding of the expectations that DCFS has for this family. And for your involvement, it will be hopefully helping you have a clear understanding of what DCFS's expectations are for that particular student that you're working with. So hopefully, as you get these child functioning modules, you'll be able to see where there are issues with that student and where they need to improve, what DCFS is targeting, so that you can work together with them, with the team, with the foster parent to help that child improve. It also provides kind of a joint vision of where everyone's going, and transparency and full disclosure, which we all know DCFS is not particularly good at or hasn't been good at in the past. But the whole point behind this tool is to help provide more of that transparency and disclosure to team members as they work with them going forward. Okay, now we're going to talk about what the scoring means on the UFACET. So a 0, if the caseworker scores it or the team scores it as a 0, it means that there's no evidence of a problem with that particular issue. If there's a 1, it means maybe there was a history or a mild problem currently with that one, but we don't need to put services in place to intervene for that. And as you can see, we have a little analogy that we use here on the slide. So this would be an example of a 0. You have this guy, he's sitting on the beach. It's a nice day. He doesn't have any issues or problems currently. And then you have a 1 where he might be a little bit halfway buried in the sand, but he's able to probably get up and dust himself off without any issues. And then you have, wow, this slide I just realized is not accurate. This should be a 2. This should say 2 right here. Then you have your 2s. Basically, this means that the problem exists. We need to put some plans and some interventions in place and some services to help with this issue. So here you have these kids, they're buried up to their necks in the sand. They're not able to get up really and get themselves out of this situation. You can kind of see this kid's face right here. If the tide came in, this would be a problem because they wouldn't be able to escape. They're not able to feed themselves. Let's not even talk about going to the bathroom. And then you have the shady bird back there who could come and peck their eyeballs out, right? So there's issues with this, and we need to address this in order to make sure that these kids can get their needs taken care of. So if that's a 2, what do you guys think a 3 would be in our little analogy here? Any guesses? Any guesses? I don't see any in the chat, so I'll just go on. Think of a 3 as a head down in the sand. This is something that needs immediate attention. We have to address it immediately, or else there's going to be a significant issue. Let's see, what did drowning, too hung up on the shady bird. Yeah, everybody kind of likes that analogy. But we use this visual to help people remember what the different scoring means. It seems to be pretty effective. Because if you can remember, a 3 is head down in the sand. We have to address this immediately because it's a severe problem, or else this is going to cause further issues in the family. And the 2 basically means I'm up to my neck buried in the sand and the shady bird might get me. So we need to put some things in place to help this student, right? The line that's really important for you to remember is the line between the 1 and the 2. As I talk about the UFACET, again, understand that this is the philosophy behind the instrument. This is the way it's supposed to work. I will recognize to you, and DCFS will also recognize to you, that sometimes caseworkers don't have a good understanding of this. So we are, sorry for making you claustrophobic. But we encourage, and DCFS encourages team members, when they look at this assessment tool, to make sure to help vet the scores and make sure that they're accurate. So if there's something that you're seeing that's an issue and it needs to be addressed, and you get the UFACET and you see it marked as a 0 or a 1, please know that you are encouraged and they need your input to make sure that it's accurate, to make sure that they understand that there's an issue with that student and that those issues are being addressed. So it's really important to remember the line between the 1 and the 2, which is no intervention is necessary, versus a 2, which is we need to put some services in place. And a 3 would be we need to put services in place immediately to address this issue. Before I go on, are there any questions about that? Amanda, can you keep an eye on the chat and let me know if anyone has questions? And I will just go on.
Yep, I'll be happy to.
Thank you. Okay. Again, having issues advancing. Okay. Then there's another column called, that was a PF column that I showed you. And the PF stands for protective factors. And I'm going to present this to you, I believe, next month. Talk a little bit more about the protective factors and the protective factor framework that DCFS utilizes, but also will be utilizing more at USBE, specifically in prevention services. But a protective factor essentially is a condition or attribute which, when present, mitigates or eliminates risks and increases the health and well-being of children and families. So an example of a protective factor might be that the child really, really likes going to school. And so having that desire to attend and go to school is a protective factor for that child specifically, and helps them to do well in school. They don't just simply exist in school, but they thrive off of it. So that protective factor helps that child to increase the health and well-being of that student. And in our analogy, it would be kind of like this. So this guy's okay, but this is the optimal situation, right? They have shade, they have drinks, they have companionship, they have everything they need for the most excellent day they can have at the beach. So that's kind of what the protective factors are. And again, I'm going to present these to you next month, but there's basically 5 protective factors that this maps to. And I'm just, again, I'll present these to you next month, but know that the 5 are parental resilience, and for youth, it's youth resilience, social connections, and this is whether or not they have healthy, appropriate social connections, a knowledge of parenting and child development, and for youth or students, this is a knowledge of their own development as well as specifically brain development. Concrete supports in times of need. So do they have all of the things that they need to take care of their basic needs, like food, water, shelter, clothing, that kind of thing. And social emotional competence, a lot about what Ashley was just referring to in her presentation has to do with social emotional competence. And this is why you hear a lot about social emotional learning in schools, because we're helping children develop those coping skills that they need, and frustration tolerance and all of that kind of thing. And mindfulness is a huge part of this. So we'll talk about those more in depth next month. That's a quick teaser for that. But know that the DCFS should be assessing those protective factors. They should be not just looking at what the issues are, the risk issues, but they should also be looking at what the strengths are of these children. So if you're working with a student and you notice that they have a particular strength, please make sure to mention it to the DCFS caseworker. They don't get a lot of that feedback sometimes about these students, as I'm sure that you can imagine. And so it'd be really helpful for them to know this is a strength that this child has that we can use in the planning for that child. They should be marking it on the assessment tool. So as you saw those boxes, not every single item has a protective factor to it, because substance abuse can't be a protective factor. There's nothing about substance abuse that's a protective factor. But other items have the box that they can check. And then at the end, they'll get a printout of what these child's strengths are. And the idea is that the team should be utilizing those strengths in planning for the child. Okay. Now I'm going to give you some key principles that you need to understand when interpreting the UFACET. These are key principles that the caseworkers are heavily educated on when they score this. And the reason we go over it with our partners as well is because a misunderstanding of one of these core principles is what really leads to contention over the scoring or the actual assessment itself not being accurate. So the first one is just a basic thing to say: every single item on the UFACET is important. It's there for a reason. We need to make sure that we're utilizing it and utilizing it correctly. The second principle is about the scores that we just went over. So again, the important thing about it is that the scores that are put onto the assessment tool translate into immediate action levels. So again, we know specifically what items need to be addressed with that student. The UFACET is about whether we continue to address the need, not about current services. Now, this is sort of a difficult concept for people to grasp, but the thing about this is that sometimes we'll put a student in, say, substance abuse treatment, and because they're in substance abuse treatment, somebody will mark their score as 0 or 1, meaning we don't have to take action on it. But it's not about whether they're in current services. It's about whether or not that item still needs to be addressed. So if the student we think is going to leave treatment and turn around and vape the next day, or turn around and smoke weed the next day, that is still an item that needs to be addressed. So what should it be scored? Give me your thoughts about that in the chat. If it's still an item that needs to be, that student needs to have treatment for it, what should it be scored at minimum? Any guesses? Yes, it still needs to be a 2, because that item still needs to be addressed. And this is something that, again, is one of the fundamental misunderstandings. And if you see a caseworker marking an item, yep, you're all right, it's a 2. If you see a caseworker marking an item as 0 or 1 simply because somebody's in treatment, that is not correct. So then the 4th key principle is the flip side of that one. We say keep scoring relevant to the situation. And the reason for that is sometimes they will, an item that's been an issue that the student has been in treatment for will follow that student for the rest of their life, right? We're really good, especially in this kind of a system, both in education and in child welfare, about putting labels on students. This is to help remind us that it should be relevant to the current situation. And if the child has been through treatment, it has shown that they've transformed their lives, that they've made a difference, that the scores should reflect that. So if a student has perpetrated on, let's say perpetrated sexually on someone, and they've been through treatment, and that was a number of years ago, say 5 or 6 years ago, they perpetrated, they went through treatment, they haven't shown any, there's been no clues, no sign of that problem happening again, that item should not be marked as an issue on the UFACET. Okay, so it should be either a 0 or a 1. I would mark it a 1 because there's been a history, we need to keep an eye on it. But it doesn't mean that that needs to follow the child and haunt them for the rest of their life. So the 4th one is the flip side of something we need to continue to address, but this is something that we have addressed and now they've made progress and we no longer need to mark it as an issue. Any questions about those 2 before I move on? Okay. The 5th one is to remember cultural and developmental considerations. So if there is an issue or something that we have to address, this key item is about remembering to put the right services in place. That we need to consider the culture of that child, the background they came from, specifically if we're talking about somebody that comes from a different country, our refugee students, our students who might be English learners. We're remembering that culture and that we're taking that into consideration when we're providing services. And the developmental considerations are the same as well. We need to remember to assess if there are developmental needs that we need to accommodate when we're putting services into place. So also a word about culture. When we talk about culture, it's much more than just students that come from another country or from another ethnicity or speak another language. There are specific cultural considerations, especially in our state of Utah, that we need to take into consideration. Any ideas what some of those might be? You can put it into the chat. But again, culture is anything in a culture that might put this student or child at odds with significant others in their family or others in greater society. Those are issues we need to look at. No guesses. So LGBTQ is a culture that we need to consider when we're looking at these children, right? There's cultural issues that come with being LGBTQ or identifying as LGBTQ that specifically need to be assessed. Yes, and religious is another one. Definitely need to be looking at those issues involved with religion. Okay, I think I've sufficiently covered that one. So we'll go on to the last one. And this one is probably another one that's a little bit harder to grasp. And it's about the what, not the why. Really, this is saying, this last key item is saying we need to ask questions. We're not going to make assumptions. So if you get a referral or find out that one of the students that you're working with is just sleeping on the couch all day long and not coming to school, what's your first, the first thing that you think about? Why would that student be just sleeping on the couch all day? What's the first kind of assumption that maybe you or somebody else on the team might jump to if they find out that the student has just been sleeping on the couch? Yeah, depressed is one of them, right? So we'll say, okay, so he must be depressed. So we're going to mark the mental health issue, the behavioral emotional item, a 2, and we're going to put him in treatment for depression. Right. You guys are so good because you're saying, why are they not sleeping at night? There's trouble at home. They can't get to school. Very good. But usually people either jump to depression or they'll jump to substance abuse, right? And so they'll say, oh, substance abuse is an issue. We're going to mark it a 2 and we're going to put them in treatment for substance abuse. When really what we need to do is assess and ask the questions. Exactly what you guys are doing in the chat. Why are they not sleeping at night? Are they playing video games all night long? Are they on their phone all night long? Is there issues at school? Are they getting into trouble? Are they being bullied? Are there transportation issues? Because that's going to go towards the rest of the assessment and marking all those items correctly. We have to ask those correct questions. Okay, so these are the 6 key principles. If there are any questions, please let me know. I'm just going to go on, but those principles are key in understanding the assessment as a whole. So let's talk about who. We already kind of talked about this. Again, I said each child in the family, significant individuals that directly impact the family dynamic. So they should be including everyone that's involved and the substitute caregivers. I also want to talk about who uses the UFACET, because some of you might have students that you're working with that also are involved with JJS or they're involved with systems of care. If you're familiar with that, systems of care generally works with those kids that are lower functioning, or they might have had past sexual perpetration issues, and they also might have some JJS charges, and they also might be in foster care. So systems of care kids really cross all the boundaries of all of those systems within the Department of Human Services. And then we also have now, hopefully most of you know this, but we have a stabilization and mobile response unit that the local mental health authorities have now, that you can call when a child is having a mental health episode. So their job is to go out on site. So oftentimes they'll go to the foster home or to the biological home. Sometimes they've been called to schools to go help that child stabilize, come out of their crisis mode. And I'm hoping that not many of you have had to use their services, but it might be really important for you to understand that they exist, but also when they come out, the assessment tool that they utilize is the UFACET. So the Department of Human Services, which has DCFS, JJS, the Department of Substance Abuse and Mental Health, which oversees all of the local mental health authorities like Wasatch Mental Health, Davis County Behavioral Health, all of those entities, they provide the funding for the stabilization and mobile units, and those units utilize the UFACET. But the DHS as a whole is trying to get all of their agencies to be utilizing the UFACET assessment tool. So it's one common language. And it's really easy for everybody to understand and speak that same language. So here's all the entities that are working with kids that are utilizing the UFACET. Any questions about that? Okay.
Tanya, I have one before
Yes.
you go on. Is it the caseworkers that share the UFACET form, or where does it actually, where does it get to our mentors from?
Yep. So the caseworkers, what we had decided was that the caseworkers should be sharing this when, specifically when they're enrolling the child in school and filling out the youth in custody paperwork. They should be providing that child functioning module with that paperwork. And if they don't, then the coordinator or whoever's receiving that youth in custody packet should specifically ask for the UFACET for the child functioning module. Let's see. I don't have the contact for the stabilization and mobile response team, but I can get that for you and have it sent out, have Amanda send it out. Yeah, I'm guessing that a lot of you have never seen one before. That's what I'm hearing, and that's a little bit frustrating, but that's why we're presenting this to you today, so that you can know that it exists and it has information that's really helpful and useful for you, so that you can utilize this in your planning with kids. Oh, one more. Let's see. Okay, so Trina from Granite says they've requested them this year. They've only had a few respond. I'm going to pass that along to DCFS, and hopefully they can specifically address that. But yes, they should be providing them to you. They have the ability to only print out that child functioning module. So they should be able to provide it to you without any issues. And you'll probably get caseworkers telling you, well, I can't share that information with you. And that is absolutely not correct. And so my DCFS contact that I put at the end of this PowerPoint today, you should write down her information. And if you ever hear that from a caseworker, then she can specifically contact them and say, yes, you can and should and have to share that information with education. We have requested them this year. We've started asking each caseworker. Good. How are you? I don't know who that is that wrote that, because it says iPhone, but whoever wrote that last one, that they've started asking each caseworker, can you let me know also how responsive they've been to that request, and if they've been providing the information to you? And in the meantime, I'm going to keep going on here, because I just want to make sure that I specifically cover the items in the module. So we're going to talk about what is assessed. Oh, okay. In response. Okay, they're sending them to a counselor. Okay, well, let's talk about that further.
No, I'm talking about the response team. If a student has ever shown any of the mental issues, I have just been told to get them to a counselor.
Okay.
And have them deal with it. Is that not what we're supposed to do?
I mean, I can't speak to specifically your LEA's procedure on that. You might send them to the counselor, and the counselor might call the stabilization and mobile crisis units. But yeah, that might be something that you want to address specifically with your school or with your LEA.
Thank you.
Yep. So again, I kind of spoke about this a little bit when I showed you what the UFACET looked like, but the family together considers items that impact the family as a whole system. And that includes the collaboration between the parent and the foster parent or the substitute caregiver. So it's looking at all of those items like domestic violence and let's see, all those, how they resolve conflict, if there are complex family system issues that we need to consider, and the cultural considerations, that one is assessed in the family together. Household, I showed you, it considers the basic needs of the family, and if those basic needs are getting met. Parent, guardian, other, again, considers the items that impact the ability of that parent, guardian, or other caregiver to function and care for the needs of the child. And then the child functioning considers factors that influence a child's ability to function in a positive manner. Okay, this is the child functioning module, and I'm going to go over each of these items so that you understand specifically what it's going to assess. I usually go through all of the modules and all of the items, but since you probably won't have access to the rest of the information on the UFACET, I'm just going to focus on this child functioning module. The first one is investment in interventions. Let me see here. Sorry about that. I had a phone call coming in. So the first one is investment in interventions. And that one specifically is asking about whether or not the child is invested in their treatment and what's happening in their treatment. So does the child go to therapy willingly? Do they try to sneak out the back door? Do they sit on the therapist's couch and not talk? Are they also invested in other interventions that we put in place? Are they invested in their relationship with you? So you should be providing information to the caseworker to help score this item appropriately. A school can also be considered an intervention. So are they involved in school? So there's that. And then response to stress is, does this child have the ability to calm themselves down? Do they have coping skills? Do we need to work on those with this specific student? Social functioning. Does this child have friends? Do they have social skills? Is this an item that we need to work with? The social functioning is really important, specifically for the older students. Do they, maybe it's that they don't have the social skills to make appropriate friends, and that's why they're hanging out with kids that, that they use with, because they just don't have the ability to, or they don't know how to walk into a room and make friends with someone. We're seeing that a lot. Recreation is, are they involved in extracurricular activities? And that might be anything at any extracurricular activities from school as well as outside of school. This is where we need to find out what interests the child have, and make sure that they're involved in something. Recreational is one of the big ones that when I was at DCFS, we told caseworkers that they needed to function. Why might it be important to make sure that the child is involved or engaged in some sort of recreational activity? Give me your thoughts on that. Social emotional outlet. Yep. It can help them find kids with similar appropriate social connections with similar interests as them. It also gives everyone, it provides them with a sense of belonging, right? And it is definitely a confidence builder. And it also provides a break for their caregivers. So definitely self-esteem, physical outlet. Yep, those are all great reasons. So recreation is one that I would encourage you to push. If you see that this is marked a 2 or 3, or if you feel like it needs action, I would encourage you to push this. Legal, this one is only scored for kids who I think are 12 and above, because they're the ones that could have legal charges. So legal are, if they have any kinds of charges or things that they might have community service hours for, it could be tobacco charges, or sorry, what are they? I don't know what they call them now, but this is, does that child have things that we need to pay attention to? Vocational skills. Here's another one that I'm thinking you guys could probably help inform. Does this child have any sort of vocational skills? And this one is scored for children 14 above, for those kids who are especially involved with the transition to adult living program. Do we need to help this child develop vocational skills? Do we need to help them build the skills they need to keep a job in the future? This is those, can they build a resume? Can they, if they have a job, can they make it to their job on time? Do they have something that they're interested in doing in the future if they're 14 and above? Maybe they're interested in computers. Have we provided them with any kind of training or anything like that in programming? Those types of things. So we're paying attention specifically to those kids 14 and above on whether or not we're helping them build vocational skills. Medical and physical are scoring, does this child have a medical or a physical issue that we need to intervene in? It doesn't simply score, is one present? So it doesn't score like, does this child simply have a medical problem, but does this medical problem need some sort of service? Do we need to put some intervention in place that's not currently there for this medical issue or this physical issue? Any questions about that? Let me know in the chat. Sexual development. Now, this one is not rating sexual perpetration issues. Sexual development is basically rating, does this student have issues with sexually acting out? Maybe they're being overly promiscuous. We have to be really careful with that one, especially with caseworkers, because they don't understand sometimes what normal development looks like. You're not supposed to rate this an issue if they, if they simply have sex with their boyfriend. But this is for those girls that you probably know and work with that are very overly promiscuous and everything is centered around sex for them. That's definitely an issue that we need to address. And so that's what sexual development is rating. The sexual aggression or perpetration issues are rated in child risk behaviors. So there's that slight nuance that you need to understand about that. Sleep is another big issue that a lot of caseworkers forget to ask about. And this is one that we tell them you need to also make sure to connect with the foster parent about. We know that if a child's not sleeping at night, then they can't function well at school. They can't access the higher brain functioning. So sleep is one that you might also be able to help the caseworker understand. If you've specifically asked and have information about that, make sure that you provide that. When I was working at DCFS, I did a lot of work with the healthcare team. You know that each of the kids in care have a nurse. And the number one issue, number one medical issue for kids in foster care were sleep issues or sleep disturbance issues. And that was 90% of the kids in care. So we tell when I was there, we told caseworkers, you really need to assess this because it might be presenting as an issue and really what it is sleep deprivation, right? So there's that one. Eating disturbance. These are kids that have they might have eating behaviors that we want to take a look at. This will rate anorexia. This will rate the pica issues where they're eating things that they shouldn't be eating. Maybe overly pickiness. Those types of things we need to know if maybe they're not getting the nutrition they need for their body to function. Self-care. Do they have self-care issues? Do they have hygiene issues? Are they able to do those basic things like brush their teeth, bathe themselves, take care of themselves? Do they have toileting issues? All of those are captured under self-care. And then we get to the ones with the asterisks. So does the student have a substance use issue? Do we suspect it or do we know it? Does the student need treatment for their substance use issue? Maybe you know that the child is vaping and nobody else really knows that. So make sure that you're sharing that information. Child risk behaviors, like I explained before, are issues that are putting the child themselves or others at risk. Again, this is where we're assessing where they might have sexual perpetration issues. This is capturing things like suicidality. It's also going to capture cutting, any type of self-harm, but also anything they do to put others at risk, like if they have excessive anger issues and if they're breaking things, or any type of putting somebody else at risk. This is where that should be captured. And if we need to put services in place, then this should be rated a 2 or 3. Education. This is where you guys come in. Well, you'll be able to provide a lot of input. Is the child going to school? Are they getting good grades? Are they functioning well when they're at school? Are they having behavioral issues in school? Are they cutting classes? Also, maybe they need to be assessed for special ed? All of those things are captured in education. If there's anything that we need to address, this should be rated a 2 or a 3. I would imagine that it would be really important for you guys, at very minimum, to be involved in the scoring of this item or give input to the caseworker on the scoring of this item. So let me know if there's any questions on that, and I'll continue to go on. Behavioral emotional needs, I told you these are the mental health focused items. So depression, anxiety, those types of things would be captured in the behavioral emotional needs. If there's an issue, again, that's marked a 2 or 3, and it opens up the further module for the caseworker to further assess. And then you could provide input onto those items as well. Developmental, is the child functioning at a normal developmental level? Do we need to assess it further? Do we need to put further services in place? How's their cognitive functioning? All those types of things are captured in the developmental. Again, if the child is maybe lower functioning developmentally, but has appropriate services into place, then and we're giving them all the services that we can, then it would be okay. And the child is functioning well with those services in place, then this could be rated as a 1. Exposure to trauma. This is one that if the child has opened up to you about something, maybe that nobody else knew about, you need to figure out maybe if you can find a way to be able to share that information with the caseworker and the team, so that we can get that student some services to make sure that we're being trauma aware and trauma focused. And we'll talk about this a little bit more next month when I present to you on the protective factors. But it might be the case where a student has opened up to you where they never have opened up to anyone else. I'm guessing that mostly you'll have information about this, the same information that everybody else gets, but there might be that student that just opens up to you, and make sure that you're sharing that information so we can get the correct services in place. And then enduring relationships. Enduring relationships is only scored for kids in foster care. And what this is really looking at is, does that child have consistent people who have remained in their life for a long period of time, and that will remain in that child's life if they're no longer in foster care. And why would you think it's important to assess whether or not kids in foster care have enduring relationships? Again, just put your thoughts in the chat. No thoughts about that? They might have abandonment issues. Yep, it helps mentors to know where to start. You working with these students can specifically help them either identify people that they may not have thought of before, or say this student really needs help identifying who those healthy, appropriate relationships could be for the future. We know that many of these kids unfortunately age out of foster care, and they have nowhere to go, and they end up on the street, or they end up in jail. And we want to prevent those things from happening before it ever gets there. So yes, all of these, it's a sign of health to have good relationships. They need long-term relationships when they're out of foster care. Absolutely. All of these reasons are critical for the child to be able to have those things, especially if they're in foster care. So I would encourage you to maybe explore that with the child. We're going to talk about something that might help you do that, an activity you can do with them to help maybe talk about some of those, whether or not they have those relationships in their life. Okay. So these are all of the items in the child functioning module. If you have any questions about them, please feel free to reach out to me or to the DCFS contact, who I give you her name at the end of this presentation. I also helped in forming all of these definitions, so I can help you understand the nuances of them. And if you ever have a UFACET and you have a question about something, you can also reach out. I want to talk to you a little bit about sharing the UFACET with other school personnel, because I've had a few of those questions come up. Again, if you happen to get the full UFACET, please make sure if you're going to share it with other school personnel that you're only sharing the child functioning domain, because the statute, the information really should only be shared about the student, stuff having to do with that student to help them with their functioning in school. Also, before you provide it to somebody else, make sure that it's accurate. If it's not accurate and you provide it to somebody else, and also if you don't provide them with context about what the scoring or anything means, then they might misinterpret it. So make sure that you're reviewing it for accuracy before you pass it on. And also, if you do pass it on, make sure that you're going over what the scores actually mean. Please let me know if there's any questions about that. And the last thing is we'll talk about the where, when of the assessment tool. So you might be wondering at what point the UFACET is filled out. So within the first 45 days of a new case, all caseworkers are required to do this on all children and all parents and everyone involved in the case. And then for most cases after that, it'll be every 6 months. If the child's in a higher level of care, so it could be a proctor home or a residential treatment center, then they're required to update them at least every 3 months. Most of them are more frequent than that. And then the last one is the big caveat. If there's a major change in the case where we need to add services, or we've discovered something new about the student or about the family and we need to put services in place, then the caseworker is supposed to be updating that. And part of the update process is reaching out to you so that you can provide information in order to make sure that the assessment is accurate. Okay, empowering partners. This is to make sure that you understand that DCFS can absolutely share this information for you. It helps them determine the intensity of the services for that student. And so that's why it's critical that they gather your input again. And they use the UFACET to inform the child and family plan for that student and for that family. And so if they don't gather that information from you, if you are not able to provide input, then they might miss key services that they have to put in place. So again, I'm just reiterating the importance of you being involved in and being able to provide information for this. This is the slide that we share to caseworkers when we train them, that you absolutely can and should share this information with everybody involved. And then it helps with early understanding of concerns that can help us put services in place early. It's not confusing for the family if we are providing this information up front. It's one shared assessment so that everybody has shared communication, and it also helps us all to have shared goals. So that's all of the information I have for you today, with 1 minute to spare, I think. And here is my information from USPE, and then Kyla Clark is my DCFS contact over at DCFS. She is the program administrator over prevention, and also not prevention, sorry, she over in-home services, and she is over the assessment tool as well. So if you have any questions for her, please feel free to reach out. She wanted to make sure to let you know that she is available for you at any time. There's also Aubrey Myers, who does the education side of things since I left DCFS. You can also reach out to him, and if he can't answer your question, then he'll refer you to the appropriate person, which will probably be Kyla. So I am so grateful for all of you and the work that you do, and I hope that this has been helpful for you. And I really hope that in the future you can see an increase of caseworkers reaching out to you for information so that they can accurately assess these kids and we can get them the services in place. And I'm also hoping that from this, you can start thinking of ways that you can utilize the UFACET in your work with the students that you work with. So if you've received this, then you can look it over and say, okay, I see where the issues are with this student and where I can help in focusing services and interventions for them. So that's all I have. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Tanya. Wow, that was a lot.
It was a lot.
But really good. And I'm glad it's recorded so that I can go back and maybe watch 1 or 2 minutes while I was too busy with other stuff, since I'm not as focused on it as I'd like. But we do have a second here if anybody has some questions for Tanya they'd like to ask. And like I said at the beginning of the webinar, shoot me an email at amanda.charlesworth@schools.utah.gov to verify your participation today and qualify for a certificate of completion or points on Midas, and include your Cactus ID or Midas if you have it. Lots of thanks in the chat, Tanya. Thank you so much. I think everybody learned quite a bit today, and I'll be in touch with you about a couple comments I received privately just to help facilitate a conversation. And
we'll see you all next month, right?
Yes, I don't have it open, but I'm pretty sure you're right. It is the December one, but it's Monday, so I don't want to,
It is Monday, yes.
Exactly. So I want to double check that, but I'm pretty sure, and I want to say it's even December 9th, if I remember right. But again, it's Monday, so I'll double check that, and I'll send everybody out a invite email with the Zoom link, and like usual, about a week before, a reminder for that training. And then with today's follow-up, I will send a copy of the form and Tanya and Kayla's contact information. And and Jeff says, yes, I remembered. Oh, it's a Monday miracle. It is on Wednesday, December 9th. So good stuff. And thank you so much for everybody for participating today. Thank you for joining me on a Monday morning. I know that could be a little rough. I know it was for me. So I'll look forward to our next one being on Wednesday. Thank you guys, and have a great day.